I'm Josh Allen, and welcome to the Baked In Podcast, where I sit down with industry innovators to uncover the unique ideas and values that are baked into their businesses and have led to extraordinary success. This podcast is presented by Busey Bank. Since Busey opened their doors in 1868, they've upheld a pledge to foster customer relationships and vibrant communities, embodying a legacy of partnership and progress. With multiple lines of business, Busey provides a range of financial solutions tailored to your needs. From digital banking to planning for retirement, Busey is here to help you achieve your financial goals. Busey Bank, building business, growing wealth since 1868. Today's guest is someone who's done it all. Built a $350 million consulting powerhouse, led digital transformations for Fortune 500 giants, and now he's turning that same business brilliance towards one of the most urgent healthcare challenges of our time, Alzheimer's. Ron Daugherty is the founder of Daugherty Business Solutions and now the visionary force behind Daugherty Enterprises and the Daugherty Foundation. His journey began in a small office in 1985 with one bold belief that technology, when done right, could change lives, and it has. But Ron's impact doesn't stop at boardrooms and tech stacks. He's a leader with purpose, challenging decades of success into community-driven innovation, supporting caregivers, funding critical research, and using AI to bring hope to families affected by cognitive decline. Today, we'll explore leadership with purpose and how one man's mission is transforming Alzheimer's care. One breakthrough, one patient, and one family at a time. Let's roll. So I'm interested sort of to start with like the idea of leadership. So you've built your company from nothing to $350 million. And I'm curious how you evolved as a leader over that period of time and what were the biggest challenges for you in leadership in doing that? Because I have found, and my business is only around $20 million, but I've certainly seen situations, at certain thresholds along that path where folks just couldn't make the leap. They were a great person for a $3 million company. They weren't the right person for 7, or they were great for 7, but they weren't right for 15. And I've often worried about myself falling into that. Like, when am I going to outgrow my own capacities? And so as you did that, and that was over the course of 40 years, were there moments like that for you from a leadership growth standpoint where you felt the most challenged?
I'm sorry, are we going now?
Yeah.
Are we live now?
We're
Okay.
live.
Okay, all right. Yeah, well, absolutely. It's a great question. And for me, my leadership style and approach quickly became about vision. That everything else followed from that. So now it's interesting because the vision thing, it's not crystal clear to a detailed level at the beginning, but the concept of what am I trying to do here, and the thinking process around what am I building, that started from the very beginning. I remember 40 years ago, I wrote down on a yellow pad of paper, to deliver exceptional value to my clients, create exceptional opportunity for my employees. That's what I did 40 years ago, yellow pad of paper. And then a few years later, I added to that, make an exceptional contribution to the community. But that wasn't the first thing I thought of. The first thing was to build an organization that did something worthwhile. And once again, the idea, if I could I'd kind of run with the concept here a bit, because
Sure.
As I think back about it, a few things that have been very important to me are not focus on what's the best way for me to make money, but on what is it that I really want to do, what matters to me, what do I want to build, what's the value that I want to create, how do I want to help people. And I found over the years that if I could find a way to help, then I could find a path to monetization and commercialization. But if I got too tangled up in, what can I do to make money, then I just lose my way. I mean,
Right.
That's the way it was for me. But it was sort of a natural thing for me to focus on vision.
But as you grew so exponentially, and
Yeah.
you built that kind of company, what were the Were there particular moments? Can you think of any particular moments where you were most challenged as a leader? Was it in the early stages? Was it scaling beyond $100 million? As I think about it, there are those key moments, those key mountains that you got to get over that sometimes feel like a big challenge. Can you think about those?
Yeah, no shortage of challenges, that's for sure. Started the business just from scratch with no outside investment. And so the first step was just to get to a positive cash flow. And, there's a book, let's see, it's something like the role of the chief executive officer by Peter Drucker, right? Big,
Sure.
well-known management consultant, leadership guru that I read early on, and it said the number one responsibility of the chief executive officer is to achieve profitability. When I read that, I thought, that's crazy. That's not how I'm wired. That's not really what makes sense. There's something bigger than that. But then over the years, I realized that if you didn't achieve profitability, someone would come, turn off the lights, and tell you can't do it anymore. So that doesn't mean that should be your sole driver. It just means that's your responsibility to do. So that was my number one responsibility, to achieve profitability. And I had a short runway, just a few weeks, and was able to do it. And then we remained profitable for 40 years in a row. So on the path forward in terms of milestones, first of all, just for me, I started as a technologist. So I didn't really have experience or training in sales or management or leadership, just technology. But I had this idea that new technology, leading technology, really brought a lot of opportunity. That's where the opportunity for differentiation, competitive advantage, that's where it lies with new technology. And always with new technology, there's confusion, uncertainty, and so on. And so that was 40 years ago. And now there's never been a better example of that than today.
Sure.
With artificial intelligence.
So did you have a hard time staying true to the technologist in yourself as you were leading and managing the company? I mean, was that an internal battle? I mean, as a baker, it's easy for me to go out on the floor and make bread, right?
Yeah.
But my job, in many respects anymore, isn't to make bread. It's to lead people, to give people opportunities, to cheerlead, to find to create the runway for other folks to be successful. But that's a battle that I have to face all the time. Is that a battle you faced for 40 years? The want and desire to be a technologist, but also the pressures and the CEO role that you were holding on to?
I got past it really fast because I found that just naturally my nature was to be much more of a builder than a technologist. So creating something, building something, those were my natural instincts, my natural strength. And so at first, at the very first, there certainly was a tendency to dive into the technology details instead of looking at the bigger picture. But for me, I got past that really fast. It became about what I was building. In fact, as I grew the company, and you ask challenges along the way, sure, for me, it was a constant learning situation. I had just as the head of this company that was going from one person, two people to over 2,000. Then along the way, how do I build a team? How do I get people to come to work for me? How do I remain true to the vision while continuing to grow and expand? And so it's interesting because a lot of the challenges for me along the way were the operational challenges. The vision, the leadership, the what are we building, the sense of purpose and shared mission, that's what I cared about.
Right. In what ways were you able to articulate that vision? I mean, obviously it's easy when you got 10 people, right? When you have 2,000 people, how do you instill that vision and that passion in an organization of that size?
Well, the larger we grew, what I found was the more of a difference in the world we could make. And I had a concept, and I was listening to some of the podcasts that you've done, Josh, and maybe this came up in a previous one, but this has been an important concept to me for a long time, and that is success versus significance.
Yeah, that was just Scott Morris the other day from UMSL.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
And I think his idea was that, at first, especially when most of us are young, and you mentioned as a technologist, you got your head down and you got to get to the success part. Because in order to keep the lights on, in order to be able to do the things you want to do and fill the vision and even do good for the community in whatever way that is, you got to build a viable, sustainable business. And so success comes first. And then we reach a point where the significance piece becomes more important and more critical, which I hope that we're going to get to talk quite a bit about with the stuff that you're doing today. And I pushed back and was just trying to figure out, and I know for generations certainly younger than me, that they're not mutually exclusive, right? Success and significance. But one does inevitably have to come before the other, because you've got to be able to afford to be significant, to be able to put resources of your organization against good.
I believe all that's very true. The way that I think about it is that, yeah, you have to be successful, grow your business, make money, and so on, but you're not significant until you use that success to help people, make a positive difference in a bigger way. And so the culture that I built into my business, Daugherty Business Solutions, over the 40 years, was that success isn't enough. We have to be significant to achieve our vision. And we're here to do something more than run a business and make money. We're here to change the world. Right. We're here to do something that matters. And so that message, and in terms of how I continue to reinforce that, just constant communication. I did for years, a weekly email from me to everyone in the company. So every Sunday night, I'd sit down and write a message to 2,000 people. And a lot of the focus would be on, here's what we've done, here's how we succeeded, and here's how we've been significant. Here's what we've done that matters, just to reinforce that. Then constantly traveling around the country, talking to people in person, and doing podcasts and doing any kind of communication that I could, just to reinforce that.
So we'll talk a little bit about innovation, because I know it's a big part of what you're doing now with the Alzheimer's research, but just you led digital transformations at some of the world's biggest companies, obviously, in what you were doing with technology. Is there a secret to being true to an innovative mindset while also being focused on operations and kind of keeping the train going on the tracks?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I just think it's so easy to lose the entrepreneurial mindset and to become just fixated on operations. And you have to pay attention to operations, right? Just to keep the lights on and keep things moving. But that's always really important to me, Josh, to never lose the entrepreneurial spirit. And so a lot of that was for me, just continuing to focus on what are we doing that's special? Why are we here? Just in addition to the significance issue, the innovation, the agile thinking, the entrepreneurial spirit, were just critical. I didn't want to have a company without that.
Right. Was that something that was instilled in you early? Was your family entrepreneurial? Did you have that sort of mindset as a kid in high school?
Yeah, not so much.
Not so much?
My dad was a school superintendent, and I did learn a lot of leadership lessons from him. He was a school superintendent in small towns around the southern part of the state for most of his career. And so I grew up, he was a teacher and a principal and then a superintendent for his last 30 plus years. And so I saw him dealing with the bus drivers and the cooks and the school board and the teachers who were often at odds with each other on one issue or another. And he'd pull them together with this idea of a vision. Why are we here? To help the kids. That's why we're here. And then that helped resolve the differences.
Yeah, I heard you on something when I was doing a little research talking about the vision in terms of the Wizard of Oz. I think that was an example that you used. Sort of,
Yeah.
you know, would the Tin Man and the Lion, would everybody be going down the Yellow Brick Road if they didn't have this destination and this idea at the end of it?
Yeah, that's right. And if there's not an Emerald City, whatever your version of the Emerald City is, then it's just lions, tigers, bears, and mean witches. Why should we do this?
Right.
Right? Otherwise, but if there's something that's worth getting to, and that's been a concept that has guided me, and is related to this innovation idea. But one of the first things that shuts down innovation is, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it's too hard, or no, that's already been tried, or that somebody's done that already, or we tried it and it didn't work, that sort of thing. And so I always try to lock onto, is it worth doing? If it's worth doing, then forget everything else. Just figure out how to do it.
Was it hard to stay true to your Emerald City? You know, as the business was growing so significantly, and as the number of employees, and as ideas, and sometimes innovation can take you, you know, chasing down rabbit holes that maybe your company doesn't have any business chasing. I mean, we've certainly had that. You know, we've chased product lines or SKUs or things that we had no business really. You know, in hindsight, we made ice cream for a while. We've done things that we just should never have done.
Yeah.
And I always viewed it as, you know, the kind of Wayne Gretzky idea that you miss 100% of the shots that you never take.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can waste a lot of time and energy and money and an opportunity chasing the wrong ideas. Was that how do you look at that?
Yeah, that's a great point. For me, that was my strength, remaining true to the vision. That was internalized, it was solid, it never wavered. The challenge that I had from time to time as the company grew was to run the business efficiently. I used to talk about this point, that I'm always delighted to make an intelligent business investment. I'm always willing to do that, but I don't want to have a sloppy business practice. And the thing is, as you grow, especially if you grow rapidly, the intelligent business investment and the sloppy business practice, sometimes you can't tell them apart.
Right.
You can't tell them apart. And so the vision helps somewhat, but that's not the entire answer, just in terms of continuing to look at does it align with the vision, but also does it make sense for us as a business?
Yeah, I think balancing that culture of purpose, the purpose-driven nature of an organization, but still, or doing it without sacrificing performance is hard. Like, do you have any advice for folks that are trying to build purpose-driven organizations, but also those organizations need to be profitable and efficient and operationally excellent?
Yeah, well, first of all, stay true to what you're trying to build and why it matters. That's the first thing. But in terms of profitability, at first it's pretty easy because it's a small organization. You can just keep an eye on everything yourself. And then the next step is training leaders, which I was able to do pretty well. The next step was harder, and that is training leaders who could train leaders.
Yeah.
Developing leaders who could develop leaders. That was really difficult because
what was the hardest part of that?
It's just, I found as we passed the 1,000 employee mark and continued to grow, that I had a large number of people working for the company at a given point in time I hadn't met. And I would try to remedy that as soon as I could.
Did you have offices, sorry for not knowing, was it all in St. Louis? Was it all over the country?
Yeah. St. Louis, Chicago, Atlanta, Minneapolis, okay. Columbus, New York, Dallas, all over the country. And then we expanded internationally. We were in Poland, Panama, Brazil, and Costa Rica. And so, that's again, went to one of the reasons that I did the weekly emails, so I would have a chance to interact at least in some manner with everyone every week. But that was the challenge. As much as I wanted, this was the conflict. I wanted to stay close to everything, but I couldn't do my job as CEO, which was strategy, positioning, differentiating the company, envisioning where we were going, and stay in the details. And so that I loved being at the higher level, envisioning the future, but I found myself being constantly pulled back, and in arguably the worst way for a leader, and that is spending my time where things were in trouble, and spending my time with
Yeah, we all find ourselves kind of fixing the weakest link, right?
That's right. Spend your time on the weakest links. In fact, I had this little story I used to tell some of my leaders to try to dramatize the point, and that is, if you come to me and say, "Hey, Ron, I want to let you know what I've accomplished for you over the last year, what I've accomplished for our business. I've taken the bottom 20% of our performers, and I've moved them into the barely acceptable zone." And then my response to that would be, "You're fired."
Right.
That's just so wrong. But it's so easy to be pulled into it. And especially with a culture that is very much committed to helping, wanting every teammate to succeed, supportive, and so on. You get pulled into it even more. But as a CEO with business units around the world, I found myself looking at the poorest, the weakest performers, and then spending my time there to get them to a better place. When the better approach is spend your time with the best performers and make them even better.
Yeah.
But that's, again, you have to build the leadership team that can allow you to do that.
Yeah, I heard a speaker once talk about it in terms of the top 20, the middle 60, and the bottom 20. And he says if you give your attention to the top 20, and that's where the middle 60 see that attention, they want to aspire to that. If you give your attention to the bottom 20, the middle 60 see that's where you give your attention, and they end up aspiring to that. And you've got to figure out how to gravitate the top 80 really by really focusing on the superstars. And we all tend to take those folks for granted, right? Because they're doing a great job. They don't really need a lot of attention. Doesn't mean they don't want it. It just doesn't feel like they need it. And I think it's an excellent point about creating that leadership, especially creating the leadership shadow of the leaders below you. Did you bring your folks together, or a certain level of the organization together, once or twice a year to try to be able to touch them personally, being so disparate in all the locations?
We absolutely did some of that, but you just reminded me of a story I got to share with you.
Sure.
Because it's a leadership lesson I learned when I was in high school. And I just, sometimes it jumps into my head. It's just an interesting thing. I was in high school, I was on the basketball team, and I was working with the coach, and we were helping some young kids, elementary school kids, teaching them how to play basketball, teaching them how to do a layup. And so most of the kids were barely dribble a basketball, and we were trying to be supportive and helpful to them, to help them get better. This one little kid, he just dribbled in. He was perfect. He was perfect. And I remember my coach whispering in my ear, "Yeah, that kid doesn't need much help, does he?" And the kid looks over, and the two of us were just smiling. And I should have stepped up and said, "That's a nice job."
Right.
But I didn't. I spent all my time on the kids who didn't know what they were doing. And sometimes I wish I could go back when I was in high school and tell that kid how good he was. So I hope, anyway, that's just something that came to mind. Yeah, if you don't recognize your top performers, sometimes they don't feel appreciated.
So let's take a quick break, and then what I really want to do is get into what you're doing now, because I think as you transition, you sold your business and you've transitioned to really being significant, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Did you know that businesses can help protect our planet with every sale? That's the idea behind 1% for the Planet, a global movement where companies pledge 1% of their top-line revenue to environmental causes. Since 2002, members have given nearly $700 million to nonprofits tackling critical issues like climate change, conservation, and food insecurity. At Companion Baking, we're proud to be a part of this mission in 2025. We're contributing through local partnerships, like donating $50,000 in baked goods to the St. Louis Area Food Bank and supporting regenerative agriculture through our partnership with ADM. Learn more about how 1% for the Planet is driving change at 1%fortheplanet.org. So after you sold your business, you pivoted towards more social impact through Daugherty Enterprises and the Daugherty Foundation. What was the impetus, or what inspired this next chapter for you? Even though, I mean, as we've been talking, clearly you were moving in that direction the whole time. But was there some particular moment or episode that really made you make the leap?
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you said, Josh, it was a natural progression. So it wasn't a change in direction so much. And it was a sale. I did sell the company, but I approached it as much more of a merger. In fact, I'm still on the leadership team for the merged company. And I just took a trip to Chicago last week and introduced some of the other leaders from the CGI Daugherty organization to the top executives at Walgreens, which is a customer of ours, and a relationship I had that they didn't. And so I'm doing that sort of thing because I want the merged company to succeed and continue to have opportunities for my Daugherty teammates and the rest
How long
of the
ago
company.
was the merger?
Into last year.
Okay, so it's pretty
6
recent.
months ago.
Okay.
6 months ago. And so continue to help with that, but it was a natural, it was just a continuation down the same path. This is how it happened. I wasn't looking for a sale at all. In fact, I'd had in my mind, and I'd even talked about this, that I wanted to transition to employee ownership.
Okay.
Employee ownership, probably in the form of an ESOP. And I'd spent years looking at various ways to do that.
Just to take a step back, just because I'm selfish and curious. You've been doing it you were 40 years in. At what point did you start having the exit or the next chapter in your life conversations with yourself? Like, at what point did you start to think about what's that transition look like?
Yeah, I mean, almost not at all. I was always thinking in terms of I'm going to grow this thing, and I'm gonna grow it till I'm 150 years old and can only work part-time. Okay. Right? That's kind of how I thought about it, and along the way I'll figure out how to transition it over to the employees. That's what I wanted to do. And so going down that path, I got a call out of the blue from Serge Godin. It was the founder of CGI, which is a $11-12 billion company now. And he just cold called me. And I got a lot of calls and emails from interested parties who wanted to buy, acquire, merge, and so on.
Sure.
So I didn't pay much attention to it. But then I realized this is the founder. This is the guy who started this 90,000 person company, and 90,000 people, 40 countries. And so I sent him an email. I said, I'm happy to talk to you, Serge, but I mean, I'm not interested in doing a deal. And so we had a good conversation. He did a good job. He'd done his homework. He found out that where Daugherty was, where CGI was, how we were complementary in terms of being in different markets, different clients. But the most important thing was the cultural alignment. He had his own foundation. He really cared about being significant and so on. And so what I ended up saying is, okay, you're doing a great job here, Serge, but there's only one way that I would ever consider doing this. There are 3 groups that I care about. 3 groups: my employees, my teammates, my clients, and my communities. So you'll have to show me how to do more for those 3 groups than any other approach I could take, more than an ESOP. And I don't think you could do it. But he said, well, just give me a chance. And so we worked it through, and we did. We came up with a way, even better than an ESOP, better than anything else. And it was partly because the company was valuable enough to him because of our strategic positioning. But for the employees, I gave $50 million to the employees, no questions asked, based entirely on tenure. So I had a receptionist that got over $100,000. And for our clients, our increased capabilities combined with the existing legacy Daugherty team turned out to be a great combination. So in every client where we're working today, the Daugherty leaders who were there are still there as leaders, only they have more capability. And the way that I shaped it was, nothing is lost, only added.
Sure.
We take nothing away, only add. And for the community, and this is one of the ways that Serge closed the deal, he said, Ron, I will match up to $1 million a year for the next 5 years that you contribute to the Daugherty Foundation. So I've been giving about $1 million a year for the last several years. Starting this year, it'll be a minimum of $2 million a year to the community. And in fact, I just talked to Serge yesterday. We talked about things are going really well. And he said, Ron, I'm so impressed with how you were contributing to the community that I think I'll continue, my contribution and match beyond the 5 years.
That's awesome. Well, first of all, congratulations, because I think
you.
to reach the end of that and to be able to articulate the terms and do it in a way that takes care of your people and your customers and your company and the community, most importantly, is really, it's super inspiring. So first of all, congratulations. I'd like to talk a little bit about the foundation. So now you have
by the way, that's such a great point, Josh, just to reinforce that. I have been asked, how do you decide if you should do a deal, how to do a deal? Just boils down to one thing. How can you do more of what you care about most?
Right.
And if you're just doing it for the money, it's a mistake. But if it lets you do what you care about most, then you're onto something.
Well, that's great. That is wonderful advice. So thank you for that. So let's talk about the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't exist. I mean, did it exist in advance of the sale, or did you form it as part of this new opportunity?
Yeah, I formed it as part of this next phase. I'd been giving to our communities for a long time, but not in the form of a formal foundation.
And what does the foundation give you the opportunity to do that you couldn't do just through charitable giving or community involvement?
It brings a little more structure. It's a standalone, not-for-profit entity. So I'm not asking for contributions to the foundation, but they could, it's set up in a way that they could be given. But mostly it's a more structured approach with a minimum contribution I put $2 million in the foundation at the beginning of the year, and I'll put at least that much in every year. And so that's a lot of it. It has a governing board, it has more structure, and I'm bringing more focus to it. The focus of the foundation is, let me say this, Josh, the whole thing started, the foundation and Daugherty Enterprises, those are two entities. Foundation is a not-for-profit foundation, okay, as you would think. The Daugherty Enterprises is a for-profit company. It's a startup. I have about 10 people in the company now. And so the two are complementary. The Daugherty Enterprises is focused exclusively on helping the Alzheimer's community, helping those with Alzheimer's, their families, and we'll come back to that in a minute. The Daugherty Foundation is focused on that as well, but also on educations and jobs, which I can cover in more detail. And in the spirit of not taking anything away, I'm continuing to support some of the great organizations that I've worked with in the past, the United Way, the American Heart Association, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the Independent Center, and so on, continuing to support those organizations. And so we're bringing more and more structure. I'm focusing more on the St. Louis community, okay, though we're doing some things outside St. Louis and will for a while, focusing more on St. Louis, focusing more on the healthcare space, and just so those are some of the differences.
And the startup is focused on, and I don't know that I totally understand it, so I'm going to ask some AI-driven approaches to Alzheimer's care. I mean, I think you mentioned in something that sort of the question that most people ask when they get the diagnosis is, now what? So what happens to us now that we have a family member, somebody that we care about that has Alzheimer's? And so you're trying to help answer that question, right?
It's such a confusing situation. And so it's perfectly reasonable that it wouldn't be crystal clear to you what we're doing. So, and in fact, I'm figuring it out more and more every day, and I'll tell you where we are. But the starting point, Josh, was I just asked myself, how can I help the most people? That's it. I've been really fortunate. I built a $350 million business with no outside investment. Here I am. How do I help the most people? And that led me more toward healthcare. And then I took a trip to Jonesboro, Arkansas, and that's where my aunt, one of my favorite people in the world, lives, and had to move her into a nursing home. She's older now, but she has advanced Alzheimer's. And so I've been aware of that. It's been developing for years, of course, but getting worse. And then a second aunt, her younger sister, who's just 78, was diagnosed with dementia, Alzheimer's. And so I just became aware of the importance of that issue, the millions of people that are impacted by it, the aging population demographics causing that number of people to go up very rapidly. The fact that Alzheimer's creates more of a financial burden on the family than any other disease or illness.
Why is that?
Because there's no cure, and it lasts for years, and it's not well covered by insurance. And so you've got to, and it takes so much time. And then, I mean, you have a situation. There's a whole vision that emerged around Alzheimer's, creating a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. And some of it's associated with this. If you think about how we're living longer, most people have some time left after they're 80, right? Between 80 and 100, that 20 years, that can be some quality time to spend with your family, your loved ones, to enjoy the rest of your life, or it can be miserable, where you can't remember who you're talking to, and you just continue to deteriorate and not only have no quality of life yourself, but unintentionally place a tremendous burden on the ones you love the most.
Yeah, that idea of health span versus lifespan, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So tell me, I mean, obviously you're a technologist and that's what your expertise is in. So you're bringing AI-driven solutions to healthcare, most specifically to Alzheimer's. Can you give me an example? Like, what does that look like in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example, and then I'll give you a little bit more of a look at how I break this thing apart, because that's so important, because it just overwhelms you instantly if you don't. But an example is we're working on an AI avatar that simulates the behavior of someone with Alzheimer's. And so just imagine you're talking to the avatar, having a good conversation, and you can set the degree, the level of moderate to severe to early stage Alzheimer's. And so why? What can you do with that? Well, as a training tool for home health care employees, for physicians, for anyone whose job is to support someone who has Alzheimer's, but also for family members. Do you understand? Here's an example of what you do working with the avatar. The avatar asks you what time it is. It's 3:30. And then a minute later, the avatar asks again. And then a few seconds later, it asks again. And then you tell it, but you're starting to get impatient, and it's starting to get the person with Alzheimer's, the avatar, getting agitated and saying things like, why don't you just give me a straight answer? Why are you talking in circles? The whole situation escalates and gets out of control. Most people don't know how to handle that. Here's how you handle it. You say, Grandpa, I know you know this, but I'm Ron, I'm your grandson, and I really love you. And I know you want to know what time it is, and I want to help you with it. Let me tell you something else. I'm really happy to be here. And it's 3:30.
Wow.
And that changes it diffuses. It puts things at a different
people.
level, and then okay, of course, Ron, of course. Thanks for trying to help me. But what naturally happens is, damn it, I just told you 10 times what time it is. And that just doesn't help anybody. But the avatar teaches that, and then the AI in the background analyzes the conversation. It comes back and says, here's what you did well, here's what you can do better. This is what you can learn from this scenario. And then we want to collect all the information and those kinds of interactions and use them for learning. But that's the sort of thing that I'm going to...
And where does that tool end up? That tool ends up at a healthcare provider?
Yeah.
Is that what...
Well, I'm working right now with Evertrue, formerly Lutheran Senior Services.
Okay.
And we're just about to have a meeting. The CEO of Evertrue, we had a great conversation. One of the things that I've been doing, Josh, is just getting out there and talking to everyone in the home healthcare space, the hospitals, the research area, BioSTL, Washington University researchers, and so on. And my concept here is I don't want to compete with anybody. I want to collaborate and fill in some of the missing pieces. This is a big problem. No one would say, yeah, we solved this Alzheimer's thing.
Right.
And so talking to everyone, understanding, and so had a conversation with Evertrue, and it just came up. These are our capabilities. These are their pain points. And so we're having a follow-up session. We're going to design this thing. I'm gonna build it and then make it available. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is investing in developing these capabilities through Daugherty Enterprises. I made the commitment that I'll invest at least $20 million over the next 5 years in building capabilities that help the Alzheimer's community. Then I'll give them away to people who can't afford them through the Daugherty Foundation. But I'll find a way to commercialize and monetize as well. Why? And this is how I say it. We're not doing this to make money, but we have to make money so that we can keep doing it.
Right.
And
Like
do
we
more
talked
of it.
about before, right?
$20 million.
Success and significance.
Exactly. $20 million of support's not enough for me.
Right.
I want to do much more than that, so I've got to make more. And
So
so,
somebody who's built an enterprise like you did before, how do you measure how do you measure success when you start talking about impact and significance, at least for yourself? Like, how do you do that?
well, how many people are we helping? We're starting with that simple point, and we're making priority decisions based on, how will this help people? That's our focus. The thing that we have that's just a real luxury, a real pleasure, is that I'm well funded, and I'm funded by myself, so that I don't have to justify anything to anybody. And it's one of the things that's just been a pleasure being the CEO and owner of Daugherty Business Solutions. One of the things that's allowed me to stay true to the vision. I don't have to justify. I don't have to file a report to the shareholders,
Right.
the venture capitalists, the so on. Just I'm driven by what I think is best, what I think is right, how can I help the most people? So we're focused on that, but it's still a great question. And so first of all, how many people can we help? And how does this fill in some of the gaps and the pain points that matter most to people? What would delight all the families that are dealing with Alzheimer's most if they had this capability? And we're working a lot with the Alzheimer's Association, great organization, working with the local group led by Ed Clay, the CEO of the organization here. They're fantastic, very partnerable. They've introduced us to the folks at the national level. And so just finding how we can help the most people. That's one way to quantify it. But then in terms of monetization, I don't want to monetize with the families.
Right.
I don't want they're in enough financial distress as it is. I want to monetize with insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, major organizations in a way, and this is another thing that I found, that you got to find the value prop, right? You can get help just by doing the right thing and asking people to support your cause, but it's unpredictable. It's unpredictable. What's the value proposition? What's the value prop for an insurance company to pay for a capability like this Alzheimer's avatar? It's because...
Oh, and the providers too. What about the schools? I mean, are the schools an opportunity?
That's right. Well, for the providers, there's a real easy equation. Their turnover is 80 to 100% a year. They have to constantly retrain people. If they have a tool that helps them with that, there's a financial impact there.
Right.
If an insurance company is doing something that allows someone to stay at home longer and not have to go into a nursing home or not have to spend as much time in the hospital, then it costs them less. So that investment costs less than what they would pay without the investment. So looking at things like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's super inspiring. I mean, I have to say, as somebody who's, we just turned 32, so I'm a few years behind you, decade behind you in terms of longevity. But as I start to think about, and I think the conversation that you mentioned that I had with Scott Morris about that, the next step and significance, it's just so cool to talk to people who are living it and breathing it every day and putting their money where their mouth is and making it happen. Do you think about legacy at all as you do this work?
Yeah, well, I do because I want it to continue on. I want it to continue on beyond me, and so I'm what I'm doing. In fact, is updating my trust fund. So if something happened to me today that $25 million would go to Daugherty Enterprises, $25 million would go to the Daugherty Foundation, so that they can continue on and have some runway to find their way. And well, hopefully that won't be required right away. But no, setting that, putting that in place, what I'll do is I'll build a leadership team that can continue on after me. And we're 6 months into this right now, so we're just getting started. But the vision. So here, this Alzheimer's thing is really confusing. So I broke it into 3 pieces.
Okay.
And what I've learned over the years is you got to break things, complicated things, into 3 pieces. At 4, I start forgetting number 1, but I can remember 3. And so the 3 pieces of the Alzheimer's situation, really simple, are the diagnosis, the treatment, and the support. So on the diagnosis side, we're working with Washington University researchers. This is really interesting. The first Alzheimer's blood test was just FDA approved about 2 weeks ago. And researchers here, this is one of the top research organizations, institutions in the world, right here at Washington University, and there are some other organizations as well. And so we're working with them. And it turns out that I've partnered with a primary care clinic in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, for a couple of reasons. The southeast of Missouri is, you might call it a healthcare desert, an underserved population. And I'm interested in helping the vulnerable, underserved areas. And also, Dr. Holyfield, who runs Guardian Primary Care in Cape Girardeau, is my grandson. So it turns out we have a great relationship there, and I love his approach, which he works with Alzheimer's patients, and he says, when I diagnose someone with Alzheimer's, the family's there, and I say, here's my job, to help you have as much quality time as you can possibly have from here on. I'm going to do everything in my power to help with that, from treatment, support, anything I can help. And so, okay, I like that. I like that a lot, and I'm going to support it. And so we're going to be talking this afternoon with Washington University researchers who've been involved in developing some of the blood tests, the body fluid tests, biomarkers, and we're going to talk about rolling out those tests in Guardian Primary Care in Cape Girardeau. And that's this afternoon, and I feel really, really excited about it. The vision that I have for this kind of testing, which is just evolving, is that when you have your annual physical, at the point in time when you start having an annual physical, you get a blood test. And that blood test checks your cholesterol, it checks for diabetes, it checks other things. I want that to include an Alzheimer's test. Amyloid protein in your blood. You can have amyloid protein in your blood 15 years before you have any signs of Alzheimer's. It's going to get in your brain, it's going to build up into amyloid plaque, it's going to cause brain damage, and you'll get Alzheimer's. It's a really simplified description of what happens. But more and more is available as we move. We focus on early diagnosis. Everybody gets the test. Just if I take this little cholesterol pill, and I'm pretty healthy. I exercise every day, I eat right, but I have high cholesterol. It's just genetic. There's nothing I can do about it. No lifestyle change. And so been figuring that out over the years. So my doctor gives me this little pill I take every day. My cholesterol dropped. Now I could have waited until I had a heart attack and then treated the heart attack. But this was better, wasn't it? It's the same with Alzheimer's. You could wait till you have it, but then you have brain damage, and it's a hard road. About all you can do is slow it down from there. We hope there will be something better. But if you can detect that you're moving in that direction, and also there's a stigma associated with this, as there is with every type of mental illness. There shouldn't be, but there is. And so I want to get rid of that. I want to change the culture of the world so that if you start to lose your memory, you don't feel like you need to cover it up because people are going to think you're senile. No, it's something else. This is something that happens, and as we're able to live longer, it happens to almost everyone. So let's get in here early, decide if we have, when are we starting to get any indications that we're going to get it, and then monitor that. Is it getting worse? And what can change it? Lifestyle changes, drugs, medication, and is that working? And let's give ourselves that extra 20 years from 80 to 100. We can enjoy it with our family. That's my vision for what we want to do with Alzheimer's.
Well, keep going because we all need it. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes this morning. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the conversation, and I hope maybe in a couple of years you'll come back and we can count all your successes and see how you've progressed.
I'd be delighted to do that. You know, I'm just, at this point, I have the foundation and I have a startup. It's just a little tiny startup. It's well funded and I have some advantages. I know a lot of people in the corporate world. I have some relationships. I have some experience and I have some money. But I have a huge commitment to making a difference with it as well. And so I'm a startup now. I'd love to get back together with you in a couple of years and show you the progress that we've made.
Cool. Well, thank you, Ron.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks so much for joining me today. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed sharing these insights from folks I truly admire. Be sure and follow the show in your favorite podcast player to be alerted to newly released episodes. And share a comment if you have any feedback or future contributor recommendations.